Hello, I'm Rosie Pollier, Head of Content at My Life Films. I'm here today with Amy Dunning from Manchester Camerata. Amy, would you give us a little introduction to yourself, please?
I'm Amy. I'm one of the community team project managers at Manchester Camerata. Yeah, we're actually a chamber orchestra, but we're based in Manchester, and our work goes, to be honest, really far beyond the concert hall. We often say, I suppose, like what we do off the stage is just as important as what we do on it, because everything we do, whether it's playing Mozart really excellently to a concert hall or whether it's running a music session in a care home, is about the idea that we have music for change. Alongside our concert work, we run a really vibrant community program which includes a creative program with young people. But mostly what we're here today to talk about is our award-winning Music in Mind program, which supports people living with dementia through group music making. What's special about that is that it's all about creating music together, so in the moment, improvised. It's like a non-verbal approach. It's quite intuitive for everyone, and it's really rooted in the idea of human connection. So whether that's between our musicians, with a musician and a participant, but also with the carers as well. So yeah, that's really special. You don't need any particular musical experience to take part, just sort of a willingness to be together and present in that moment. More broadly, we're now just over a year into being awarded the UK's first Centre of Excellence for Music and Dementia. So it's really exciting to be at the forefront of shaping what that looks like, not just for us at Camerata, but also a little bit for the whole sector and nationally as well.
Thank you for that introduction and congratulations on being awarded that Centre of Excellence status. And what
Thank
does
you.
that actually mean?
So, what that is for us is that we're funded by a combination of the National Academy for Social Prescribing, as well as a few other sort of match funders and an NHS partnership to deliver two of our music cafes, so two of our music making groups in each borough of Greater Manchester. So, as part of that, we're training up a team of music champions who are sort of volunteers who are in the community. Some of them are ex musicians, music teachers, some of them are ex carers, sort of from all different kinds of backgrounds, just have to be interested in sort of working with groups of people living with dementia and volunteering with them with music to support them in sort of delivering their own sessions as well. So the view is that over the next 2 years and hopefully way beyond that, we'll be sort of training those volunteers who will then be able to go on and really take ownership of those music cafes themselves. And longer term, it creates a really sustainable model for that to continue. So yeah, that's the core bit of the program. But as well, we are supporting and facilitating a new Power of Music consortium, which is basically a get together of all these organizations nationally that work on music and dementia. So we're sort of sharing best practice, thinking about how we can better inform policy, basically just becoming a group and joining up all those dots that I think quite often, particularly in small community sort of music making groups or in any voluntary sector, really can, it can often feel quite isolated. So bringing all those together is a big priority as well.
Fantastic. And you mentioned this idea of sort of the power of music.
Yeah.
What is it about music that makes it so powerful in actually connecting with people living with dementia?
I think for me, what's really special about music is that whoever you are, I think we all have some kind of relationship with music. And that connection, whether it's a song that you really love or a particular ability you have, or just wanting to listen to certain music at certain times of day or having the radio on when you're cooking your tea or whatever that is, that connection to music doesn't go away with dementia. In fact, actually, we found, research showed that music really reaches the parts of the brain that are often less affected or remain unaffected by dementias, which is why I suppose that music can really cut through when other forms of communication might be harder. For example, in our sessions, we really see how music can create a space where people can be present and engaged without like a need to rely on memory, I suppose, or a need to rely on language. So it's often like really small things. So like someone joining in with a rhythm, singing a phrase to a song they might know, or even just making eye contact or something like that. Those moments become really meaningful. So it helps people to create those moments of human connection and kind of because of that be seen for who they are and sort of see beyond that idea of a diagnosis. I think, the way people respond to music, like what styles they're drawn to, the way they might play, or kind of the social role they might take within a group, whether they're a leader, a follower, or someone who really uplifts others, that to me reveals a bit more about their personality. It can be funny, and full of emotion. And I think it reminds all of us, I think, in the room facilitators, carers, whoever that may be, that actually there's still a whole person there with their preferences, their quirks, their creativity. And I think often one of the hardest parts of dementia is that it strips away that and the impression of individuality. And because of that, dementia care, I think, often strips away someone's independence. So many of the choices that someone might take every day and we might take for granted, what time to get up, what time to brush your teeth, what to wear, suddenly those choices, I suppose, aren't there anymore. What is powerful about music, and specifically about improvisation, actually, is that it gives a little bit of that choice back. People get to decide whether they're partaking, whether they want to just listen, how they want to respond, whether singing, tapping, playing, or none of those things. Also, something really important is that it's not about doing it right necessarily. It's about just being part of something, offering what you can to the group and actually just having that control over how you take part.
I think that's a really beautiful explanation. And I really like this idea that the music is a vehicle for people to express themselves when perhaps other vehicles like language might not be there for them anymore. And a way of expressing autonomy or choice or themselves when they're not in a situation where maybe they can do that so much. I feel like I've had several instances of people who perhaps have lost some of their verbal capacities or struggle a lot with words, but perhaps when a song comes on, they might then be able to engage with the song lyrics a bit more. Do we have a good understanding of why that might be?
I suppose I'm not a neuroscientist, but of what I would say is I think it's not necessarily about the specific words of a song. And that's kind of what we say quite a lot in our sessions, is that it almost doesn't matter if you can remember the specific words to that part of the song. But what's really important is that it seems one of the last things to go when it comes to the pathology of dementia is actually feeling. And, you might not remember a song, or you might not remember the specific words, but you remember how it makes you feel. We see a lot in sessions. People can be getting quite emotional in groups, particularly. A lot of the songs that people offer are the ones with really high emotion. They might be ballads or linked to a particular memory or feeling in their life. Because those are the songs that are linked so closely with a specific emotion or a specific feeling, they are actually the ones that people tend to pull to, whether consciously or otherwise. I wouldn't say I'm sure necessarily why it is that someone isn't able to hold a conversation or can't make a cup of tea or tie their shoes, but is able to sing the whole of a Sinatra lyric or something. But I think what that does do is actually speak to how difficult it is and impossible in many ways to separate music and lyric from that feeling, and how music has made us feel across the life course. And it's equally as funny when you put a song on, or we are led to a particular piece of music by someone, and then someone else across the circle is like, oh, I absolutely hate this. That's almost, well, it is absolutely as valid a response as a song that you really love. And I think it's important that people are able to express that negative emotion as well. And it's all about that idea of choice.
Absolutely. And as you say, like music can have such strong associations with different memories or different parts of our lives. And sometimes these will be amazingly positive, and other times they'll be negative, or that you just won't like the song. Just
exactly. You just don't like it. It's fine.
Don't like it. And speaking on that sort of emotional level, what kind of emotional or psychological benefits do you think music can promote in individuals with dementia?
I think music is quite a unique tool, and particularly participation in music. How we run our sessions are not performance based, although we're an orchestra. We're not sending two musicians into a care home to play a concert. It's all improvisation using instruments. We really invite our participants to interact with those in whatever way feels right for them. So that in that process, we're engaging multiple areas of the brain simultaneously. So, you're working on your emotional interpersonal skills by smiling, making eye contact across the circle. But also you might be thinking about motor physical skills as well. In our standard music packs, we'll have a maraca, which you can get a really satisfying sound out of by holding and shaking. But then we have, for example, some handbells, which require you to press a little button on the top, or a drum, for example, requires sort of two hands to coordinate. So that there's a lot of physical benefit as well that goes way beyond the emotional, and that's the supporting of rhythm and movement as well. But what I would say that's definitely important when it comes to the emotional is also that we are using music to, I suppose, foster a sense of equity, particularly between those participants who might be verbal, non-verbal, differently verbal, and still allowing that forum for people to connect through music. We use instruments that require a wide range of motor skills, and we do a little bit of singing, but actually you can almost have, we call sort of like musical conversations that can happen across a circle through rhythm, call and response, and you don't need to be able to form full sentences of that. And that can be really satisfying for someone with dementia, because losing language and losing that ability and losing that autonomy is something that's really deeply emotional and really deeply frustrating for people as well. And if we can provide a moment in the day where they're not necessarily thinking about what they can't do anymore, but they're thinking about what they can bring creatively to a space, then I think that's where that link with improved well-being really comes.
Obviously, at My Life Films, we run a dementia-friendly TV streaming service. And on that platform, we've got quite a few music-based pieces of content, including a music workshop that demonstrates and encourages people to engage with a folk song. So Molly Malone is one of the ones we have on there. And we've given people options as to different levels for them to engage with. So they can sing along, and there are subtitles for the lyrics that are on the screen, but people can also clap along or tap their legs or use an instrument if they've got one to hand. And that, for us, in terms of that dementia-friendly content, was really important in terms of having those different levels and offering, as you say, the possibility of a musical conversation when language might not be there. Is there strong sort of quantitative evidence around the role of music in reducing agitation, for example, anxiety or depression? Do we have a kind of really strong evidence base for that now?
Yeah, definitely. It's really improving, actually, the sort of research and evidence base. Like, we've had personally a sort of 12, 13-year partnership now with the University of Manchester. And we're currently, I think, on our third or fourth PhD around the sort of effects of music and regular intervention. And what we find actually is that there's a huge reduction in agitation, is the first thing. There tend to be improved relations between the person living with dementia and sort of their primary carers, increased, I suppose, compliance or ability to go about daily routines and tasks and all those things. What we get the most out of as well is the sort of testimonies received from loved ones and carers. I remember one carer speaking to us and saying that actually it ended up being pretty much a lifeline for her because it allowed her to relate to the person for whom she was caring. But yeah, definitely. As part of this new Centre for Excellence programme as well, we're working closely again with the university. And the plan for this longer term is to be able to access the GP and Greater Manchester health records of the people that we're working with. So we'll be able to map over the period of being as part of a project with us, the sort of number of GP visits, reliance on prescription, hospital admissions, all of those kinds of things as well. So the view is that we'll be able to see in real terms how a long-term sort of arts therapeutic relationship and attendance to a group program and all of those kinds of benefits over a longer period, hopefully over a year, 2 years, 3 years, how that affects how someone is interacting and hopefully how frequently they're interacting with the healthcare services.
Amazing to actually be starting to gather the evidence to draw the connections between social prescribing, music cafes, those sort of more, I guess, what we don't sort of traditionally consider as forming part of like healthcare, but to be able to draw the connection between engaging in those activities and actually healthcare utilization, GP visits, number of medications. That sounds like a really amazing piece of research to be part of.
I think, in the past when we've done our research, it's been really excellent, but it's been quite rooted in people who've been in care homes. And this is the first time we're really stepping into looking and thinking about how, people who are living in the community, so more likely than not are being cared for directly by a loved one, how what we do and how music and also how the work that the Alzheimer's Society do with Singing for the Brain will impact on their interactions with the healthcare service.
And also really interesting what you were saying earlier around the role of these sessions and the role of music in actually helping people to connect with their carers, with their loved ones, and perhaps strengthening those relationships. And that being good, not just for the person with dementia, but for the carer, and perhaps also helping to sustain, and perhaps your research will yield more results on this, but perhaps allowing people to stay living at home for longer. Is that also part of what that research is looking into?
Yeah, massively so. I mean, we sometimes say actually that our sessions are as much for the caregivers as they are for the participants. I think that's really true, particularly as we've started to work more and more in community settings, because the thing that comes back time and time again actually is that the experience of caring for someone, no matter who they are, is something that's really, really isolating. And what we've started to do a little bit more is support carers over that long period to talk about not only how they can best support in sessions, but also actually how they can take a lot of what happens in our sessions and use that at home as well. And I think we are hoping to keep people at home for as long as possible. But if what we can do over that period of time is give carers a little bit more of a toolkit into like what they can do when we're not around, is really useful. So some examples of that, I guess, is using music to establish routines. So playing a specific piece of music or a specific song at a certain time of day, or to indicate a certain action needs to happen. It's time to get dressed, shower, whatever that may be. And also music, as we know, has the ability to shift someone's mood. So what kind of music, what kind of playlist might someone put on if the person that they were caring for was showing particular signs of overwhelm or agitation? What we always say is that we are the experts in music, and that's what we do. But the carer is always the expert in their loved one. So they are the best person to be really responsible to that individual's needs at any specific time. You don't need a huge box of instruments. You can do it at home with pots, pans, biscuit tins, singing along to the radio. If we can support carers, then that's a huge part of what we want to do.
That's really beautiful. And I like this idea of using music as a way of supporting daily activities and helping to create structure.
What can be so challenging and difficult about living with dementia is that recognition of what isn't there anymore, that, who someone used to be and what they used to be able to do. But what music does really beautifully for caregivers as well as people living with dementia is bring people into the moment. And I suppose when we're in the moment, when you're being present and fully present in a situation, you're not thinking necessarily about what was or what will be or what isn't there anymore. So that is just a really natural and beautiful tool. And I think that's something that carers can really make the most of. It's kind of important to recognise is that for carers and loved ones, it can also be really challenging, particularly in our sessions, to see someone when they're having an interaction with a music therapist kind of light up or respond really positively to something, particularly when in their experience that person may not respond in day-to-day interactions with them. And I think it's also really important to recognise that our music therapists are trained as allied healthcare professionals. Music can create this specific environment with a set of expectations and a set of circumstances, and also really builds that idea of security and trust. And not only that, a lot of participants also feel like there's a certain expected response to a piece of music or a setting as well. And so I think what's particularly important is to recognise that it can be really difficult to see that, but also to allow carers to feel as part of the process as possible. We tell carers what we're doing. We sort of try and bring them in and talk about what we're looking out for in sessions and what decisions we might be making if we're potentially going up to someone and maybe offering them a different instrument or swapping a sound or encouraging them to be part of a musical game or conversation. Trying to communicate with carers, I think, exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it really builds that sense of trust and allows them to be really actively involved in the music making themselves. So yeah, we hope that as part of our sessions and as the training we offer continues, that we're really able to empower carers, I suppose, to feel part of that themselves as well.
Absolutely. And as you say, hopefully take some of those tools back home so that they can continue to reap the benefit of that. Do you have any favorite moments from any of the sessions that you've been involved in that you might be interested in sharing with us?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's loads. I think almost every session you come away with a particularly memorable moment. One that stands out to me, I was lucky enough in November last year to go out to Taiwan on a research trip with two of our facilitators, and we were working with some university students and the National Symphony Orchestra out there on sort of a training program for cultural exchange, so how we could learn from them about what their process of dementia care is and how they use music over there. And likewise, we were delivering some training on our methods. And as part of that, we were running a series of drop-in sessions for people and carers living in the community. There was one specific gentleman who hadn't really been super engaged in the sessions in a way that you would think. He'd sort of been sitting here like this and tapping his finger a little bit, but there wasn't a huge amount of interaction. I sort of got the impression that his wife, who was there with him, had sort of dragged him along to see what it was all about. But he started tapping this beat, and from that, we ended up morphing it to a Taiwanese folk song that we'd learned, where it sort of became almost like a little bit of a game, like we'd morph into it and then morph out of it and improvise in and out. It was kind of what you were talking about before. He just started singing all the lyrics, and none of us had really thought that that was something he might do. And then there was another gentleman across the circle who started with a handbell singing Jingle Bells. His wife told us afterwards that it was the only song in English that he knew. It became a bit of almost like a bit of a joke, really, that we were going in and out of these songs and comparing and contrasting them. And I think it became a huge group activity that the whole room of like 30 people was involved in. But I think what stuck to me was the kind of idea that being really playful with what we do and move away from the idea of seriousness or singing a song correctly, or that often dominates both dementia care, but also it dominates sort of Western classical music training as well, which is the background that a lot of our facilitators come from. And I think this kind of energy is really important. And although it was quite a small example, it points to the idea of the real need for being culturally inclusive and culturally competent in the work that we do as Western classical musicians. I think it's really easy to fall into particular patterns and expected songs and things that we think might come up. But actually, in order to better serve the really diverse groups of people that we work with, it's really important that we diversify our own process and our own thoughts as well, and our understanding of music and how it resonates with individuals, but also different cultures. And I think in this case, the song that we ended up choosing held a huge amount of significance for that gentleman. And I think what he was actually ended up laughing about was the fact that we had, as Westerners, had gone in and taken the time to learn it, but also offer it as kind of a shared experience that we were offering to him as much as he was offering to us, which really built that idea of connection. I think for me, it served as a reminder that as we expand our work and as we work in communities across Greater Manchester that are, unbelievably diverse, that we always need to strive to really meet people where they are, both creatively, culturally, musically. And it's not really at all about playing the right notes, but it's about understanding the significance of the notes and developing who we're working with and allowing us as facilitators to really understand and ask more questions, as well as being the ones that are always performing, I suppose.
I love this vision of a sort of Taiwanese folk song, jingle bells, mashup.
We sort of ended up doing some quite funky like dance moves with it as well. I think if anyone had walked into that room at that time and hadn't seen how it had built up, you'd be like, what on earth is this? Like, what is going on here? Like, what kind of craziness is happening? But I think it really spoke to me from the moment that from literally just a tapping finger, something that a huge group is involved with across cultural backgrounds, across backgrounds in ability, age. Music really became that inclusive tool. And I think it stands out to me even now as one of the times that I think, it felt genuinely participant-led.
It makes me think of what you were saying earlier about this idea of creating musical conversations and how those conversations can have different tones, and how this one almost was like a musical joke.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think often when people start working with us or first come to sessions, I think what they're sort of always expecting we want is that kind of happiness, that smile across the room, that, sort of bob along, everyone has a great time all the time, and then, leaves feeling happier, which, don't get me wrong, that's absolutely brilliant. But I think it's really important as well that our sessions reflect both the diversity of people, but also the diversity of emotion that we all feel. I think we'd be doing our participants quite a disservice if we were constantly playing like music all the time and expecting that response, because the human experience is naturally filled with moments of joy, but there's also a lot of sadness and challenge and anger and all of those things that come hand in hand with it. And I think it's so important that we can hold a space where if someone wants to feel their feelings and feel really sad for 5 minutes of that session, then absolutely let's do that. And in this case, it was, let's all have a joke and laugh around and sort of poke fun at ourselves a little bit. But I think it's as important that we hold space for those quite challenging emotions or those, big feelings that might come up, as it is to constantly offer the happy as well.
No, absolutely. And I think there's such a feeling of frustration, particularly when you're perhaps not able to communicate in the way that you might want to. And I can see how music or perhaps an instrument or just tapping away could act as a real catharsis for some of those feelings. And as you say, it just reflects life. Life is not always happy and jolly and full of joy. And those moments are incredible and you want to foster those wherever possible. But it's interesting, by taking that kind of more collaborative co-production type approach, you want to be responding to the participants where they're at in that moment.
That's exactly it.
Amy, thank you so much for today. It's been so interesting.
Yeah, thank you. It's been lovely to chat, and always good to speak a little bit more about what we do, because I'm really lucky to be doing this kind of work as well.